Greetings and Talofa Lava, everyone. Welcome back to the Foucast. I'm Faafetai, the Soaring Samoan, your host. Now, if you've caught us from our first episode, you know that is a part one of a two-part series. This is where I tell my story and share it with you. Part one was the beginning, or the moment I got bit by the bug, all the way to the moment I received my commercial pilot certificate. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the continuation, the very first job opportunity, all the other opportunities that followed, all the good things, all the not so good things, all the people that I've met throughout my career, and the moment that I arrived at my dream airline. A very exciting episode. I'm excited that you're here, and I invite you to sit back, relax, enjoy the ride. If you haven't already done so, do me a favor, go ahead and like this video, share the video with your friends and family. If you like the content, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Any little form of support will help us grow. Once again, we'll be right back after this. All right, welcome back, folks. This is the continuation of episode 1, so this will be part 2 and the last part of this two-part series where we talk about my journey of becoming an airline pilot. But before we continue, I just want to share something with you. My wife got me this for Christmas, and I'm super excited about it. We're now on air. All right, so that was a little cheesy. But anyway, we're going to continue from the moment I got my first job opportunity, all the other jobs that followed, and so on. And before I continue, I want to take this back to the very beginning, and this is going to help explain how I got my very first job. So back in 2013, I was still in Honolulu, Hawaii, working as a customer service agent for Hawaiian Airlines. And I remember this flight to be an inter-island flight, and it was from Honolulu to the island of Maui. On this day, we had a unique situation that required a unique solution, and that situation was this. We had an oversold flight. Unfortunately, they had run out of people that they could upgrade for free to first class. Now, the way this flight was oversold was this. It was only oversold by one passenger in the economy cabin, but there was also one seat open in first class. Now, I know you're probably sitting there and say, oh, easy fix, just go ahead and upgrade that person. However, there are policies in place for airlines when it comes to this kind of procedure. But on this day, we've exhausted option A, B, C. No one wanted to volunteer to a later flight. We had no first class passengers on a later flight who wanted to go early, which was often a common thing. But on this day, on this particular flight, we just couldn't find anyone. So with the approval of my supervisor, we were able to pick a passenger from economy to upgrade to the first class cabin to vacate this oversold situation that we had. While working the computer, I was the control agent for the flight. I went ahead and just pick a random passenger. I paged his name. He reported to the podium where I was standing. And as this gentleman approaches the podium, I told him, sir, I've got good news and I got bad news for you. So I gave him the option, which one do you want to hear first? And he said, how about the bad news? Well, the bad news is this. You no longer have the seat that is on your boarding pass. He goes, okay, what about the good news? The good news is that you have a new seat on board this aircraft. That seat is in first class. Hope you don't mind the last minute change. Enjoy your flight. Mahalo. He then responded by saying, in my 20 plus years in the aviation business, this is the first time that this has ever happened to me. And so me being, occupied with the fact that we're trying to push this flight on time, I said, okay, awesome. Well, there's always good things happening. And today it just so happens that it's happening to you. And he said, yep, you're right. Then he asked a question that not a lot of people would ask at this point. And he said, do you happen to know who's flying the aircraft? Now, I don't often just sit there and give out names of employees for privacy reasons, for personal reasons, all of these kinds of things, right? So I politely told the gentleman that, hey, look, I can't give you that information. He goes, okay, no, that's fine. I'm only asking because I, in fact, have a couple of friends who fly the Boeing 717 here at Hawaiian, and I was just curious if one of them was operating the flight. So I saw no harm in it, right? No big deal. It also occurred to me that, hey, pilots say their names on the PA once they introduce themselves to the passengers. So I said, all right, well, I'm just going to tell them the name of the captain, but instead of the full name, I'll just say the last name, right? I said, okay, so today your flight is being operated by Captain Kevin Daisy. Kevin Daisy is also one of those pilots that I saw as a mentor. He's always nice to me when he shows up. He always bugs me about, have you started flying yet? Have you started studying yet? Have you started doing this? And if I had any questions, I would text him, and without any hesitation, he would respond. So I knew the captain myself, right? So I said, his name is Captain Daisy. And he started chuckling and said, well, what do you know? I gave that guy his first flying job 15 to 20 years ago. He's one of those friends that I'm telling you about. And I made a comment. I said, well, I hope one of these days I have the opportunity to sit and learn from Captain Daisy on the flight deck. This gentleman stopped, looked at me and said, are you a pilot? I said, I'm a hopeful. Have you started training? I have. Well, how far along are you? Not too far. These were like just short responses that I was giving him. He says, well, what's holding you back? It's $7 a gallon of 100 low lead over at Lagoon Drive at the Honolulu airport. It's also about $290, so about $300 per hour dry rate on a old Cessna 152. And I was only getting paid $8.75 an hour, or maybe $10.25. I'm confusing my jobs. I think it was $10.25 an hour. So I wasn't making a lot. He goes back to the line. We start the boarding process. And as we called for the first class group, he comes up. He hands me a business card and he says, when you get your commercial license, I want you to call me. So didn't even look at it, just grabbed it, put it in my pocket, and went on with boarding the flight. Left on time. So I go back to the employee room. I remember the card. I pull the card out of my pocket and I looked at it. And the card stated, Mr. Ron Hansen, CEO, founder, Mokulele Airlines. That was actually the airline that I was looking forward to be my very first opportunity to fly. Fast forward now to 2018. I'm sitting over here as a newly minted commercial single-engine pilot. I remembered this moment, and I rushed to this little shoebox that I had with me since Hawaii. So I go in there, and I was fishing through all the old business cards, all the old, membership cards that I had, and I found the card. So I picked it up, picked up the phone, and I called the number. Within 24 hours, I received a text message from Mr. Hansen. It wasn't about maybe 3 or 4 days later, and my phone rang, and I looked at it, and there was a number coming from Hawaii. I answered the phone. I am the chief pilot for Mokulele Airlines, and I was told to give you a call. So we talked for about 10, 15 minutes, and at the end of the conversation, I now have an interview waiting for me in Maui. So when that day arrived, I hopped on the plane. I flew to Denver, hopped on the nonstop from Denver to Maui, and when I arrived in Maui, the chief pilot was waiting for me in baggage claim. We went over to the Mokulele operations. We sat down. We did an interview. We did both technical and some HR type questions right out on the ramp. So at the end of the interview, I was told that I would be contacted by the director of operations in regards to class dates and training and so forth, right? Then what followed was a little tour of the operation in Maui. And then at the end of it, we shook hands and they actually allowed me to fly on one of the caravans from Maui back to Honolulu so I can catch the next flight going home back to Tulsa. Got home, and told the wife that, hey, I have now been offered a first officer position and the start of my career. Here we are getting ready and awaiting the official CJO or conditional job offer, as well as the official Class 8 email from the Director of Operations. 1 month passes, 2 months, 3 months, and still no word. So I decided, well, I'm not going to sit around because I need this experience. I don't have enough time to lose because at that point, my goal was to make it to United Airlines or any other major by 30. And so I picked up the phone and I had called the chief pilot at Mokulele back. And he answers the phone. And the conversation that ensued was rather disappointing. The first thing he told me was, well, I had already sent in your paperwork after our interview, and I'm not sure why he hasn't gotten to you. Now, mind you, at this time, I had been following them heavily on social media. And there were a few pilots who I followed on social media who posted about going to Maui to get interviewed. And then here we are sitting in a class date in Maui, all within a month and all after I had gone through the whole process. So I'm like, something doesn't seem right here, right? So when he called me back, he said, hey, the director of operation told me that he doesn't have your paperwork. He said, also, while I'm on the line here, I'm going to let you know that this is my last week working as a Mokulele chief pilot. I'm like, great. Right now, we're just going through a transitionary phase. So to me, translation was, we'll get to you when we feel like it. Who knows, right? So anyway, I couldn't stand that. I couldn't stand the feeling of having to sit and wait, of being upset at the fact that I put all my trust in this application process. I was super excited about it. My family was excited about it, just to find out that it was gone with the wind, if you will. Fast forward, I decided to not sit around. So I went on Facebook and I just started typing, right? Just looking for mentorship, looking for people in my same situation that I could ask questions to. And I just typed Samoan pilots in the United States. And there were a few posts on there, and one in particular caught my attention. And what I mean by that is that this person was working for a Part 135 operator that I had never heard of. I've never seen this uniform before, which kind of caught me off guard. But everything that he was posting was like in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, who is this operation? I have never heard of them. So I kind of like zoomed into the wings on his chest, and I saw it said Southern Airways Express. I sent him a message. I noticed that we had a lot of mutual friends from home in American Samoa, and I was on there. I sent him a message, and I'm very grateful that he responded rather quickly, and he told me everything about this airline. And basically what it is, it's the mokulele of the mainland, except they are on the East Coast, right? I went back to my wife and my father-in-law. We talked about this. The very next day, I get a phone call from the hiring manager for Southern Airways Express. She was super awesome. She calls me. She wanted to just get like a pre-screening interview and got all my information and said, okay, your official interview takes place tomorrow. So be ready for that. I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, great. So the next day comes. We finally get the phone call. The phone call took about 30 minutes. And then at the end of it, she asked about my availability. And I said, ma'am, I will be there tomorrow if you need me to be there tomorrow. And she said, okay, well, here's a question for you. Do you have your multi-engine rating? And then I said, no. So here's what we're going to do. We need our pilots to have multi-engine commercials. And I'm like sitting here puzzled. Why? You only operate Cessna Caravans. Spoke to my father-in-law. We were able to talk to the school that I had rented airplanes from. We trained, and then we scheduled the multi-engine check ride. So I met this individual, had a really good brief the day before. I was very excited about the check ride the next day. I was like, hey, it's a multi-engine add-on. These usually don't take that long because we're just going to get in, talk a few about the systems of the multi-engine, a couple of the differences, and then we're out, we're going up, doing maneuvers, doing single-engine stuff, right? Well, we never got to the practical part of the check ride because it ended during the oral examination. And to make a long story short, it is one of the most frustrating, infuriating, and worst experiences of my life with this particular DPE. Basically, I told him, hour and 45 in, that I'm done. I don't want to continue this. I don't feel good. So it didn't go well, right? He basically told me, okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but this is now a failure. I said, whatever. So I took the L, as the kids would say, went back home, regrouped, retrained, and rescheduled with a different DPE this time. Got to that second one, passed the oral, no problems. So we get in the airplane, we started up, we go fly. Everything was going well until the last portion of it, and I busted an item and busted the practical this time. So now I've got 2 busts on my multi-end commercial. I said, okay. So we got back to Tulsa, we landed, did some additional training with my father-in-law at this point because my flight instructor wasn't available. I came back the third time, and this time, thank goodness, it was a successful check ride. We did the oral, everything was great. We did the practical, everything was great. Came back, landed, got the paperwork. But because I now have 2 failures on my record, I felt the need to self-report. A lot of people, when it gets to this part, they think they don't have to, right? And let them figure it out. I'm a firm believer of being honest, okay? Because honesty is, like they say, the best policy. So I picked up the phone. I called the hiring manager at Southern Airways, and I said, ma'am, so I've got some good news and some bad news. Good news is that I'm now a commercial multi-engine rated pilot. The not so good news is that I busted the check ride twice. She goes, oh no, I totally understand if this in fact becomes the deal breaker. She goes, well, hold on, not too fast. Let me talk to management and I'll get back to you. I said, okay. She calls me back a few hours later and she said, okay, I'm sending you the CJO and the email. I need you to sign it. But the question is, are you able to make the next class, which is in 2 weeks? Mind you, I was also still an active flight attendant at United Airlines. She goes, "Are you able to make training in 2 weeks?" I said, "Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes, right. I'm not going to say no to this opportunity." She said, "Yeah, I spoke to management. They said that's okay as long as you have the rating and you don't bust through training when you come through Southern Airways, then we're okay with that." So great. Got the CJO, signed it, sent it back to Miss Julie. And then I was like, oh no, well, what about United? So I go back to United, start moving trips around, and was able to successfully do that. Thank goodness it was possible. So 2 weeks gets around the corner. I'm on a plane headed to Palm Beach, Florida. And the very next day, we started training, which was a week long of indoctrination in Pompano Beach, Florida. So anyway, went through training, successfully did that. And at that time, Southern Airways Express trained all of their pilots initial training at Flight Safety International in Wichita, Kansas. Now, this would be the first time that I am ever going through any kind of training like this, right? I'm like, oh man, it's like the big boys. After indoctrination, we all went home for like a week or so before they assigned us to go to training in Wichita in the winter. And that's where I went. I spent about a week and a half, I think, in the initial caravan course with flight safety. And at the end of the program, walked out, successfully checked out in the C208, and was also told that your new base is now going to be in Hagerstown, Maryland. I have never, ever lived east of Oklahoma ever in my life. But here I am, getting ready to embark on this new opportunity. And what I've noticed is, oh my goodness, I still haven't heard from Mokulele yet. Maybe this is where I'm meant to be. So that was my very first opportunity. I was in Hagerstown, Maryland as a first officer on the caravan for about 4 to 5 months before I was informed that my transfer to Arkansas was approved. So I got into Hot Springs, flew in Hot Springs for another 6 months, until I reached the Part 135 FAA requirements to upgrade, which was 1,250 hours of total time. When I got there, without even self-declaring, I got an email from the company saying, "Hey, get ready, you're about to go to upgrade training." And I said, "Woohoo, great." So my sim partner and I got in, we did our training, and 3 days later, we both walked out, officially signed off as pilot in commands for the Cessna Grand Caravan for Southern Airways Express. I go on my way back to Tulsa. I received the email with our official base assignments, and I got really nervous. I'm like, oh boy, here we are. I'm going back to the East Coast. But fortunately, being the most senior of the group of upgrades that day, I was awarded Harrison, Arkansas. I did that all the way up until I got to 1,550 hours of total time, 1,550. So here I am approaching the final day of work as a Southern Airways Express pilot, and I just had a bad feeling about COVID at the time. Right at this point, it was just hearsay, right? And they were starting to talk about mandates. Nothing was official at the time. And as we got closer, I said, I just have a bad feeling about this. So I called the director of operations directly, Mr. Phil Lefevre, rest in peace. And I said, "Phil, I know I just submitted my resignation letter. I was wondering if there's any way I can rescind that because I don't have a good feeling about this COVID thing that everybody's talking about." And he said, "You know what? Sure, why not? I have a quick question for you. How would you feel about being a captain in Imperial, California?" Now, at this time, which is, again, a full circle moment, right? Remember that airline that I talked about earlier, Mokulele, that never called me back? Even to this point, they still haven't called me. Well, a few months earlier, my airline, Southern Airways Express, acquired Mokulele Airlines and purchased them. And they had an operations in the mainland out of Imperial County, and they were flying daily flights to LAX, and I think they were just ending the Santa Maria route. But anyway, it says, so because we just acquired them, we don't have any Southern Airways pilots there. We only have Mokulele Airlines pilots there, and I was just curious whether you wanted to go be based over there and fly in California and kind of show them how we operate with Southern, because obviously it's two different kinds of operations. And I said, sure. So I went and I flew in Imperial for an entire year, the entire year of COVID. And mind you, after we had this agreement, the very next week, no gatherings more than 10 people, everybody stay indoors, all this. We already know what COVID was like. And so I'm very grateful at the time that I pull and rescinded my resignation letter, because if I kept it the way it is, now I'm here without a job, right? And without building my flight time. So it was a blessing in disguise in a way. So I go to California. I flew there for about a year, got to meet a lot of great people until COVID started relaxing some of its rules, and some operations were starting to pick back up. Unfortunately, the regionals were not, right? And at this point, I think I had about 2,000 hours of total time, and I just hit over 1,000 hours of turbine PIC time. So I said, okay, well, maybe I should start looking into the corporate world. No one would look at me then. And it made sense, right? We're just coming back from COVID. I'm sure a lot of pilots were furloughed, so they're trying to bring their, pilots back. But then I found out about another operation in Oklahoma City, and this operation was called Private Jets Incorporated. So I said, okay, this location is about an hour and a half from Tulsa. But if you want something, you go and try to get it. So one day I decided I was going to dress up in a suit, which I did, get a fresh cut, shaved my face, printed out my resume on a nice piece of paper, hopped in my car, and drove an hour and 30 minutes west. I arrived to this location, arrived to the FBO. I walked in and I asked the receptionist at the front desk, I said, hey, is the chief pilot in? She said, no, he's flying. Is the director of operations in? Yes, as a matter of fact, I think he's upstairs. I say, would you please, is there any chance I could see him? So the director of operations comes down, and I introduce myself. And I just wanted to come in, stop by, and drop a resume in case you're looking for any first officers. He said, well, the reality is right now that we are still operating at COVID capacity. We have a few pilots that are on furlough, so until we bring them back, we really can't do anything at this point. But we will hang on to your resume. I said, great. So 6 months in, I'm still flying the Caravan at Southern, and I get a text message from the gentleman. And it said, hey, we might have a new hire class year coming up soon. How's about an SIC position in the Beechjet next stand? And I said, absolutely, I'm all for it. So fast forward, everything all aside, I got hired by Private Jets Incorporated in Oklahoma City. I attended INDOC, attended our little flight training that we did, and then I got signed off under what's called Part 6155. And I started working. My schedule was 10 on, 5 off, 10 days on the road, 5 days off at home. I did that for about 6 months. Lo and behold, I get a phone call from Mesa Airlines. And they said, hey, we need you to pick a date for your new class. When I looked at the dates, it was like a month away. This was not like a 3-4 months from now, whatever. No, it was a month away, and we need you to pick now. So I did. After I picked the date, and mind you, the reason why, because I'm sure even to this day, I still have friends who ask me, was it worth it, right? Yes, because as I mentioned earlier, we talked about we need to sacrifice early, not get too comfortable, so that way we can get to our end goal and then be comfortable at that point. The only biggest problem here for me was I felt so bad. I was conflicted because I really enjoyed working for the Wells family and Private Jets Incorporated and the management team that we had. But then I also have an obligation with Mesa Airlines. What I did fail to mention earlier was that the obligation with Mesa was, in order for me to be a cadet, I had to sign on for a $10,000 bonus, which they handed me a check for $10,000 in 2018 when I started with Southern Airways Express. And as you can imagine, I did not have the ability or the luxury to just hang on to that check and give it back and say, no, thank you, I'm not coming to Mesa, because now I have my hours. We were very poor. But we knew that if I go to Mesa, we won't have to pay the $10,000 back. And 2, then I'm going to be on the right path to getting to United. So I submitted my resignation letter to PJI. And then when the time came, I went to Phoenix, Arizona, and I started training for Mesa Airlines. We did 1 week of indoctrination. The following week, we did systems training. And unfortunately, at the end of systems training, not a single one of all of my classmates and I received a schedule. as to what's to take place afterward. We didn't know until the end of the last day, which was the day we took the systems test on the Embraer 175, that we found out that it was going to be a long wait. So we were all told, book yourselves your jump seats because now you're able to jump seat, not even a positive space ticket, and we need you to fly back to go back home, basically, until further notice. And they were going to pay us, I think, 50 hours a month of training pay, or 45 hours a month of training pay at $36 an hour. You do the math. It wasn't a lot. So after a month of sitting at home with no word, this forced me to go get a job at the warehouse that my wife was working at the time, making $8.25 an hour doing drop shipping for this company. And after 3 months of doing that, I said enough is enough. So I applied to my next opportunity, which was a company in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Sun Country Airlines. So I applied to them when I found out that they were hiring and that their requirements I met. And shortly after applying, I received the email to schedule an interview. So I went to Minneapolis, did the interview, and then a few days later found out that via a phone call that I am now being offered a position as a Boeing 737 pilot for Sun Country Airlines. Date comes around the corner. I fly up to Minneapolis, start training, went through indoctrination successfully. Then we started the first week of AQP training. Excited about it. Went through the first phase, no problem. Go through the second phase, no problem. Get to the third phase, and we get to the maneuvers validation, and I was recommended for additional training. No problem, right? So we do 1 day of additional training the following day, and then shortly after that, we get ready for the check ride. When we got through that validation, incompletion. Not a failure, but it felt like a failure, because for some airlines it is. Then I was sent directly to what is known as the TRB, or the Training Review Board. They were okay. They said, okay, since he did really well, a lot of good notes, we're going to offer him another chance. Did additional training, redid it, and incompletion again. TRB again, and then I got the call from the chief pilot at Sun Country saying, Fo, I'm so sorry you have to go through this, and but your union should be calling you shortly. Great. Union calls me, says, hey, they are not recommending you for additional training. Got a call back from the chief pilot, and the chief pilot says, okay, so here's what we've come up with. We really like you. Okay, we want you to be here, but it's just the formalities of things, right? Because we've had 2 incompletions and several additional trainings. Here's what we'd like to do. We'd like for you to the opportunity to go ahead and submit a resignation, right? That resignation will allow other companies to still hire you rather than us basically letting you go because of training struggles. So I thanked the chief pilot, thanked him for the time, thanked the operations for everything. I really appreciated the experience, and submitted my resignation. Now, while I was awaiting for them to give me a ticket to go back home and packing up my hotel, I applied to NetJets, I applied to FlexJet, I applied to Wheels Up. Within 48 hours, I received a call from FlexJet wanting to do a phone screening. I did the phone screening, and mind you, all of this is happening while I'm still sitting at the hotel, unemployed at this point. FlexJet did the phone screening, and following the phone screening, they said, well, hey, we like everything we see. We like it. And I even disclosed to them what just happened at Sun Country, mind you. Said, great, we love everything, and we like to invite you to come down to Dallas. We like to schedule you, and it's on this date. I said, great, sign me up. Shortly after that phone call, I get a phone call from NetJets. Hey, we like to do a phone screening. Great, okay, cool. That's awesome. Okay, well, with that in mind, we'd also like to invite you to our hiring expo. It's a 2-day event in Columbus, Ohio. Sign me up. So fast forward, it just so happens that with scheduling, NetJets was the first one that came up. So I flew to Columbus, did the interview, did the expo, and didn't hear anything. Came back home. And about 3 days later, I received a phone call. And mind you, I was already on the forums, right? But what I did find commonly was they're going to call you whether they want you or not. I remember that day. I was out front in our old house working in the garden, and then my phone rings, and I look. It says NetJets. I'm like, oh, no. So I run into the house. I showed my wife, and I said, NetJets is calling. And so I answered the phone. She goes, well, I don't want you to stress out anymore for the rest of this day. This phone call is to let you know, and we also have management listening right now. We want to call you and offer you a position as a NetJets first officer. Will you accept? And I just got quiet and I said, with everything that I have, I accept. I humbly accept. So here we are getting ready for class date at NetJets, which I did the indoctrination. Great. Reported back to Columbus because now we're going to be training at Flight Safety International. I was also lucky that I was one of the few people in my class on the Citation XLS that did not train in Columbus, Ohio. They actually sent us down to Orlando, Florida. So I spent about 3.5 weeks in Orlando for my type rating. And when the check ride came around the corner, because I was not an ATP-rated pilot at the time, they were also going to sign me off for my ATP. So therefore, because of that, they had to split my sim partner and I and do 2 different types of check rides. I went first because they said because it's an ATP interview, and went in and successfully did that. And then my sim partner went in after, and then at the end of the day, we both got in the simulator, we both passed our check rides, and we were headed home after that. Finally got the call about a week later to get ready for IOE, and I did it. And I flew for NetJets for about 10 months before I decided to apply to United. Why, you might be asking? There was something in my heart every time I would show up to the airport to commute to my flights for NetJets when I would hop on a United airplane or stare out the window and see a United airplane, because it was like it was still calling my name. It was like it was pulling me. So I applied. No success. And so I said, all right, maybe it's just not the timing. And then I found out that they have this thing called the Meet and Greet program. 2 months later, we are on a plane headed down to Houston, Texas, to meet with the Houston chief pilot. At the end of that meet and greet, we shook hands, and as we're about to leave, the chief pilot told me, I usually wouldn't tell candidates this, but here's a few things from today. I normally could tell from the first minute of when you open your mouth and tell me about yourself that either I'm going to recommend you or not. Today, I usually spend 30 minutes on a candidate, the most. It's now been 45, 50 minutes past, and we've been here talking. So I also usually don't tell the candidates what I'm going to do, whether I'm going to recommend them or not, because if it's not, I don't want them to feel bad walking out of here. But today, I think we're ready to welcome you back to the United family. So here's what I'm going to do. He sits down, he types up the email, and he sends it to Pilot Recruiting saying, highly recommend for interview. The very next day, refresh my email, and there's an email from Pilot Recruiting stating that they want to move forward with the process. That process was the Hogan test, or the personality test. After I did that one that day, about 24 hours later, I got an email saying they want to move forward in the process. And please schedule an interview. For me, it was a month. Like, I had within a month to schedule this, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So finally scheduled one. I flew up to Denver, very nervous, very anxious, rightfully so, and did my interview. So that was done, and then I came back home to Tulsa. 2 days later, I hopped on the plane, and it was about 12 o'clock in Denver at this point, and I said, you know what? I wasn't going to check till later, but I'm going to check anyway, because this is the day that they're supposed to send out all the CJOs if they wanted to. So I bought the internet on the Delta flight, cruising, refreshed it 3 times before it finally kicked in, and then I see Pilot Recruiting at United.com. I sat there, closed my eyes. I was actually in the middle seat. So on the 717, you got 2 seats here on this side, you got 3 seats on this side. I was in the middle seat because it was all that was available on that flight. So the middle seat in between 2 very sweet ladies. So I'm sitting there, and it's like, okay, I just closed my eyes, kind of, I basically was telling myself, Lord, if it's what I'm hoping for, thank you. I'll be grateful. If it's not what I'm hoping for, I will still be grateful. And so I finally mustered up the energy and the courage to open the email. So I go into the mail app, I pop it open, it pops open, and I just close my eyes and I hit the thread. And the first thing that I saw when the thread popped open was the United emblem, was the United logo, but nothing else, just the United logo and the date. And I was like, oh, great. It requires me to scroll. And I ever so slightly scroll, and then bam, the first word I saw on the left side was congratulations. And the rest was the official CJO with a job as a first officer for United Airlines, my dream airline, right? I did the meet and greet in October, did the interview in November, got the CJO at the end of November, and then December, mid-December was when I got the email saying that here's another CJO, now with the official class date. The official class date was, I think, March of 2024 or 2023. I was like, okay, March 2023, that's not too far. Great, I got 3 months to go. That's awesome. But I'm not that kind of guy, right? I knew that seniority was everything. At every single class, United was bringing in about, I believe, 60 to 70 pilots per class. And that is a class every Tuesday. So numbers were coming in, and the more that came in and the longer that I waited, the less seniority or more seniority, whatever the case may be, right? So I gave them about a week before I started hounding them over in Denver. And I meant hounding as in every week I would send an email. So at the end of every tour that I had, I would update my hours in the system, and then I would also fire off an email saying, hey, hope all is well. I just wanted to send another update and also to state that, I'm available if there's any last-minute cancellations. I would love to join as soon as possible. So this went on until about the end of December, and I received an email that states, hey, can you accept a class in January, but January 31st? I said, yes, that's a lot better than March. So I signed another new CJO, which was for January 31st. 4 hours later, I actually get another email. We just had another opening, a class a week earlier, and that's on January 24th. Can you do that class? I said, absolutely. Sign the CJO, and that's what became my official class date. So that time comes around the corner. I'm in Denver. I am so excited. Checked into the hotel. They hand me this little envelope on the front. United Airlines, First Officer Faafetai Lava. There was a little bit of hesitation when it came to picking the aircraft, and I was very close to selecting the 777 out of San Francisco merely for the fact that I was having a little bit of PTSD from what happened at Sun Country, feeling like I was not capable to fly the Boeing 737. So that day when it got to me, usually what happens is when it's your turn to get up and choose an aircraft, you will rise from your seat, say your name, and then say the aircraft and the base that you've decided to select. On that day, my mind was saying, I'm going to get up right now and I'm going to say Boeing 777 San Francisco. Instead, I rose to my feet and I said, First Officer Faafetai, Boeing 737 Houston. So here I am, went through the whole training program successfully. The most fun and exciting program that I've ever been through. So I did my 1 year of probation as a 737 first officer. And then when the probation period ended, I decided, well, why not seek other opportunities? So I put in for this one big vacancy bid that we had, and that vacancy bid was a lot of wide-body positions. Put my name in the hat, bid closed. I was awarded a first officer position on the 767, 757 out of Houston. Successfully passed my type rating, had a great sim partner, very knowledgeable sim partner, had so much fun going through it. And then when I finally got released to the line, wonderful time OE on the 757 and then the 767-300. A correction. Then I did my international and ocean crossing, as well as the 767-400 familiarization ride to Munich and back out of Washington, D.C., and was completely signed off. And then for an entire 9 months on that airplane, I was either the bunkie to Munich or down to Rio de Janeiro, or I was flying as the flying FO on the 757 domestic flights. But 6 months after that, because this was in January, right? So 6 months later, come through the summer, I decided, well, they are hurting for captains right now because every vacancy that I've seen, there have been so many unfilled captain spots. So I put my name in the hat, and sure enough, according to this vacancy, even though you're going to be awarded it in June, or was it June? In June, it won't be activated until October or November later in that year, just because of timing and training scheduling and all that good stuff. So I put my name in the hat, Boeing 737. And I got awarded San Francisco. Went through the indoctrination phase or charm school, completed that, did my wing ceremony. My wife and my kids and my in-laws, they were able to attend. And then I got ready for qualification training in the airplane. Now, since I was already type rated on the 737, I didn't need to do all the requirements for the type. I just need to do the United Airlines and FAA requirements to be a captain. Completed the training, got my my official sign off, and went right into IOE 3 days later. I had 3 days off, contractual, did the IOE. After IOE, went straight into the line. And here we are, over a year later, as a United captain, flown over 1,000 hours on the type, and now about 700 hours in the left seat. And that's where we find ourselves today. And I leave you with this. As we close part 2 of episode 1, and as you've heard, it wasn't the most cleanest, it wasn't the most smoothest, and it wasn't the most perfect record that you had ever seen. There are pilots out there in the world that do, in fact, have clean slates. The reason why I wanted to do this podcast is for this. There might be someone watching this who is currently going through or just gone through everything that I had been through. All of us have different backgrounds. All of us have different experiences. What we all do have in common is that we are all here for each other. Persevere. It's not about how you fall. It's about how you get up and how you continue and how you use that experience to mentor others. Not everyone's path is the same. Not everyone's goals are the same. But we are here for each other. Despite how vast the aviation industry is, it is still, in fact, a small world. That's all I have for you today. I wish you all a safe and happy New Year's, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next video. Once again, I'm Faafetai, and you've been watching the Foucast Stories Beyond the Horizon. Until next time, you're clear to disconnect.